to be able to get all the water to run there. And then it could go to my house, right? And I was probably 6, 7, 8, I don't know, somewhere in those ages. And he had kind of built that road because he said, anytime you want to come see me, I want to make sure you have a path to be able to get to me. And I grew up with four-wheelers and all sorts of things, so I could ride those things, and that was great. But my grandpa was a little bit older, and four-wheelers weren't his jam, and so he had a golf cart. And the golf cart was like the old school one where it's a three-wheeler. It's a three-wheeler. It's the Harley-Davidson old school one. So it had, like if I'm in the driver's seat with the gas pedal, it's got a weird handle over here, like a big metal hoop thing, and that's just straight down to the front wheel, and you're just turning the front wheel when you want to turn. It was the coolest. It was the coolest. I had a four-wheeler, and in hindsight, four-wheeler seems cooler, but because it was my grandpa's, it was like the coolest, right? And so it was a Saturday afternoon, and my dad and I were over there. My whole family were over there, and I think that there was something that we wanted to get. Back in the olden days, like Tonka toys, so my grandpa had tons of heavy machinery, right? That was his whole thing, his backhoes and all those sorts of things. And I had just gotten one that was, like in the olden days, they made things out of metal. It was crazy. It was crazy. They made things out of metal. And so I had this new metal, probably front loader or something that I was using to play in. And we were over there Sabbath afternoon. We came home from church. We had lunch. Then I was like, oh, man, Grandpa, you got to see this cool thing. It's just like yours, only way smaller. But it's just like yours. And he was like, oh, go get it. And so my dad and I got in the golf cart because I was still pretty young then. And so they let me drive the golf cart, but usually only if somebody else is in there. I don't know why four-wheelers were okay to drive since I was like 3, but golf cart. But anyways, so I'm cruising over in this thing. We drive through that dirt, around the pond, blah, 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 up around the hill. We pick it up. We jump back in from our house. We're driving back, and along the path, it's like this long, straight stretch before you get to the pond. We could see like a mound or something out in the distance. And we were like, man, what is that? So we keep on cruising on up to it. We get closer, and we stop. And I'm looking at it, and I was like, what is this thing? It's a big, big mound of something. It was a turtle. Now in West Virginia, there's turtles everywhere. They're box turtles. And I grew up thinking they were called box turtles because we'd catch them and put them in boxes. But it's not. It's because a box turtle can actually close. Like normal turtles can go in, but box turtles, once they go in, they close up. Their bottom part comes up and closes. Who knew? I actually told that story once, and somebody's like, dude, I got to tell you what a box turtle is. Like, oh, thank you. So we had caught them all the time. Like all the time we'd catch those turtles, play with them for a couple days, and then just release them and all those things. We saw this thing, and I was like, that is the biggest turtle I've ever seen in my life. And my dad said, that's awesome. We should put it in the golf cart and take it so that everybody else could see it, right? And I'm like, that is a great idea, Dad. Grab it. And he's like, son, you grab it. And I'm like, Dad, I don't think so. And he's like, he gave you one of those looks. If you're a male, sometimes your dad gives you this look like, be a man. It's not always in words. It's that look that he gives you when you're younger, and it's like, oh, man. Yeah, I'll get it. And so I get out of the golf cart, and I walk over to it, and I'm getting closer. I'm like, well, what do I do? Like, it's kind of looking at me. And he said, go around to the back of it, tap it with your shoe. It'll go into its shell. We're good. Then you pick it up, and you bring it back over here. Now, that thing had to, like, at 6, there's 0% chance I'm picking this turtle up, but we didn't think that part through. So like if its head's there, I sneak around to the back of this turtle, my little self, and I start to put my foot out, and I'm shaking, but I'm trying to look manly, and I'm shaking, and right before I got to its shell, this turtle jumped in the air, spun around, stuck out its neck, and made the loudest chomp I've ever heard in my entire life. I proceeded to spin and run as fast as humanly possible in the other direction, kind of hoping deep in my heart that turtle would attack my dad for putting me up to this thing. So I'm running down, I'm running away. I'm like, what in the world just happened? I played with turtles ever since I can remember. This turtle is If you remember the 90s or in the 80s, there were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's what this was. I was confident this is exactly what that thing was. And so we ran away. I don't know everything that happened, but I do know that we got back. I think I ran all the way to my grandpa's house. Like, I'm not even stopping. That's a crazy turtle. My dad drove over there, and we started to talk about it, and my grandpa said, oh, that's a snapping turtle. Yeah, you don't want to mess with those. And actually, since we don't want to mess with those, we did. We drove back, and we were giving it like sticks. My sister, she's 4 years older than me. She remembers this better because I called her and asked her. She said, do you remember that sound? We'd stick the stick out, and it would just snap that stick, break it just so quickly. She was like, yeah, that thing was terrifying. And I'm thinking, my dad tried to have my leg bit off. What in the world is going on? And here's the deal. In this world, we are surrounded by great people, people that God loves, people that God has chosen, but ultimately we're people. We're people. We need to go to people and ask for advice. That part's true. We need to get as much. I still call my dad for advice, even though there was a time he lit me on fire. There was a time he had to have my leg bit off by a turtle. I could go on and on and on. I still say, hey, Dad, I got this thing coming up. What do you think I should do? But stories like that do help me know that that's just a piece of advice, right? Because we're human. But the amazing thing that we have is the ultimate cheat code. We have a direct connection. Ask. Even, like I said, my dad, my grandpa, when he was alive, he was one of the first people that I called. I've had I've had lots of superintendents, but two that have really been impactful for my life. I still call them anytime I have a decision. My 5th to 7th grade teacher, fully retired, still call him every time I have a big decision, right? What do you think? He gives me advice 0 times. 0 times. He asks a bunch of questions, and then he says, let's have prayer. That's his advice. He's giving me advice 0% of the time. He'll tell a story every once in a while, but it's just nice to hear from him. It's just nice to connect. God puts people on our lives that can have a profound impact on us. We want to ask for their advice. We want to connect with them, but ultimately, we want to be moved by God. He gave us the most important power, the greatest superpower ever in the world, and it's called choice, right? And if you watch superhero things, which I really don't, but if you were, they say, with great power comes great responsibility. That's real. The ultimate power of choice, there's nothing that causes more responsibility needed than choice. We have to have great responsibility when it comes to our choice. I want to read a story. I want to cruise through this story. And the problem with the Bible can be that if you're raised an Adventist, which I was, or raised a Christian, you've heard these stories 35 trillion times. And you're like, dude, I know that one. It's the Red Sea. Good. What else you got for me? But those stories are crazy, crazy, crazy powerful. And the thing that I've discovered in life is, depending upon what my circumstances are, different parts of the story will stick in my heart. That's the power of the Bible. That's the power of the Bible. Sometimes I've heard people say it's like an onion. You can peel it off and there's multiple layers. That's a good one, but I really don't like onions. And so that's not a great one for me. But it is true like that. You can peel it off and you get more and more stuff. And so I want to read that part to you. It's a lot like Exodus 14:14, but we'll get kind of a run-up to it. So Exodus chapter 14, verse 5, starting there. And again, if you're like, dude, I know this story, ride along anyways. Connect it to what's going on in your life. I guarantee that God has insight from His Word for each of us. That's something we can guarantee. That's something we can guarantee. So let's jump into this. And the first bit we do know, it says this. We can get a small running start. There was like these Egyptians, and they enslaved the Israelites, and some of that has to do with people being sold into slavery from way before that, and all that fun stuff. And now they've been some plagues, and they told a small lie, at least the way I read it. They say, hey, can we go into the wilderness for like 2 weeks to worship God, and then we'll come back? I don't remember that being part of the plan, so we can have a whole sermon about lying some other time with your other pastor. That'd be perfect. But in this case, they've been released. And God basically told them, walk that way. I have a promised land, walk towards it, right? From what I remember of the story, at least up to this, and I just read a whole bunch from before this, basically their last instructions from God were walk. Walk. Go that way. Walk to the promised land. So that's what they've been doing. They've been walking, right? And at this particular point, they've been walking and they've come to pretty much a stop. And they've come to a stop because the directions were walk, but there's a Red Sea in front of them. And the directions weren't build a boat. The directions weren't swim. The directions were walk, and they've come to the Red Sea, right? So that's about where we're at. But at the same time, while they're coming to the Red Sea and they're getting there, they forget that there's a whole, or they don't know yet, that there's a whole army of Egyptians they're about to come for them. That's verse 5. Exodus chapter 14, verse 5. When word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites were not planning to return to Egypt after 3 days, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. What have we done letting all these slaves get away, they asked. So Pharaoh called out his troops and led the chase in his chariot. Now, if you study history, Pharaoh doesn't lead the troops in the army very often. In fact, we don't have very many, maybe like Genghis Khan, possibly. But other than that, in history, the people in charge don't lead the charge. They stay sometimes at home. But if nothing else, in the back, right? The people in charge don't lead the charge. Pharaoh's got some anger, though. He wants to see the look on their face, it sounds like. And so he's leading the charge. He took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with the commander. The Lord continued to strengthen Pharaoh's resolve, and he chased the people of Israel who had escaped so defiantly. That's pretty crazy too, right? Jesus continued. Sometimes, boy, I know that there are times where I pray, I know something must happen, and so I pray for God to give me strength to have that happen. And when I look back, I say, was that? I don't know that God gave me strength to make that happen, but I should have been praying, God, is this what you actually want me to do? I don't know if Pharaoh was in that same place. I must get them. God's help me. And God said, well, I'm the only God, so all right, I'll strengthen your resolve. We don't know how that stuff went. We also know in the Old Testament, God's in charge of everything, right? God did this, God did this, God did this. There's no Satan caused this to happen. It's just God nonstop. Verse 9, all the forces in Pharaoh's army, all the horses, chariots, and charioteers were used in the chase. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they were camped beside the shore near that one place across from Baal-Zephon, it looks like. So they came to the water, they stopped there, and they did what we do. They said, what in the world, God? You asked me to walk. And I walked, and now I ran into water, right? What in the world, God? You asked me to give this money, but now I'm out of money. What on earth is that supposed to be? God, you asked me to give of all my time to be able to help these people, but now I'm exhausted. Now I'm cranky. What in the world? You asked me to do this. You asked me to go for a walk, but now I found a small problem. There's a pond. There's a Red Sea in my way. There's a whatever else. Plug that into your life. There's a whatever that's happening that's causing this to not work out the way I thought you were telling this to work. But now it gets worse. As Pharaoh and his army approached, the people of Israel could see them in the distance marching towards them. They thought they had a big problem. There was a Red Sea in front of them. But it turns out that was small fries. Because the real problem is that there's a bunch of people coming. Sometimes we come to these problems and we say, man, my life is impossible. And then something way, way worse happens. Then we say, whoa, 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 now it's impossible, right? And first of all, that can be fine. It can be impossible, but remember, God loves impossible. It's his favorite. As soon as we say this is impossible, it releases him to do his thing. It's a recognition that I can't do this. And God says, thank you. I've been waiting 6 months for you to recognize that. Now watch this. Now watch this. It's a quick thing. One of the things I pray for, honestly pray, God, help me to see the impossible sooner. Help me to recognize that this is impossible. Because as humans, it's I can do this. I can powerfully, I'll just work harder. I'll just do more. But it's important for us to recognize this is impossible without God. The people began to panic, and the beauty is, it says next, they cried out to the Lord for help. They do remember where their help comes from. Now, we can cry out in different ways. Dear God, we trust you, we know, or what have you done to us, right? Both of those are crying out to God. I think God's a big enough God to be able to handle that. One of the things that we say to our high school students is, be honest with God, because lying it's futile. If I'm as the principal, I'd love for you to tell me the truth, but if I think you did something, you can lie to me and I may not catch you, right? Maybe you'll get, but with God, it's futile. He already knows. And that's a great thing. That's a release thing. I might as well be completely honest with God because He already knows. We might as well be honest and scream out what we're really feeling like, right? When somebody comes and says, hey, I just need you to do one more thing at work, and you're like, oh, I'll be glad to. But inside you're like, are you kidding me? What have you done all day? We can kind of do that thing with each other, and I don't even know what's right and wrong in that, because we don't want to always be, whatever, we won't go down that way. But with God, we can be completely honest. It's such a liberating thing to be able to have somebody that you can just tell the honest truth to. God, I'm really angry right now. Inside of me, I'm really upset. Help me. Help me with that. And He says, thank you. I'm on it. Verse 11, then they turned to Moses and complained. Why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? Why did you leave us? Didn't we tell you to leave us alone while we were still in Egypt? Our Egyptian slavery was far better than dying out here in the wilderness. So they might have cried out to God, but then they instantly found a scapegoat. They found a human to blame. I can relate. I think we can relate, right? We say, God, this isn't, but then we find somebody to cast our emotions on because it makes us feel a little bit better if we can blame somebody else. But Moses told the people, don't be afraid. The most stated scripture in the whole Bible, don't be afraid. Right? If you can get anything out of the Bible, it's every time an angel appeared to a human, their first sentence was, don't be afraid. Because when we see an angel, I think it does something to us, and it makes us say, oh my word, all those things that I thought I am nothing. And the angel says, don't be afraid, I'm only here to help. The God in heaven loves you, and I'm here to help, right? It's a beautiful thing when we realize we have an army of angels here to protect us and help us accomplish His missions. Don't be afraid, just stand where you are and watch the Lord rescue you. The Egyptians that you see today will never be seen again. And here we go, the Lord Himself will fight for you. You won't have to lift a finger in your defense. That's what God is telling us this morning. I believe that with all my heart. I don't know what everybody's going through. I know a little bit of the things that I'm stressed out about, and I think what God is saying this morning is, it's Sabbath. Take a rest. Don't lift a finger. I've got this. And He says that, but I want to make sure that you read the very next sentence, because if we end there, then it's like, sweet, I'm going to go sit on my couch for the rest of the day, maybe the next 3 weeks, because God is going to do all of my work for me. But that's not what happens here. This is Moses said, hey, watch God do a miracle. Chill out. It's not going to be you. It's going to be Him. But the very next sentence says, verse 15, then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to get moving. And the part that comes away from that is God saying, what did I tell you to do like a week ago? I told you to walk. You stopped walking. I didn't stop you from walking. You stopped walking. Remember, your original mission was walk that direction, but you found water and said, oh, humph, we better sit here for a while and camp for a couple days because we ran into water. And God's saying, whoa. I asked you a long time ago to just walk that way. I didn't ask you to do anything spectacular. Just walk. Go back to the basics of what I set up for you to do. You guys stopped doing it. He says, use your shepherd's staff, hold it out over the water, and a path will open up before you through the sea. Then all the people of Israel will walk through on dry land, yet I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians. They will follow the Israelites into the sea. Then I will receive great glory at the expense of Pharaoh and his armies, chariots and charioteers. When I'm finished with Pharaoh and his army, all of Egypt will know that I'm God. I have things that I want God to do right now. I have things that are stressing me out. I have things that I know should happen. I'm pretty sure should happen. I have an opinion should happen. But remember, God works on a whole different level. Because I want that whole school to be a light for this whole community. I really, really do. And that's real. And I think that that's a fine passion to have. But God's saying, I got a whole world. In fact, I got galaxies that are watching what happens there on the planet of Earth. And I have a mission for all of them to see my glory. And so what we're talking about for our church here, for this church to be able to do great things, God's 100% on board with that. This is God's church. That is God's school. But he's bigger than that, right? He's so much bigger than that, that when he does things here, they can be for the honor and glory for people to see him all around the world. It's an incredible thing. And then the other piece is that God's, I think when I read that part, just those couple sentences, God's saying, get back to the basics. What did I ask you to do? You derailed yourself by thinking. You derailed yourself by, I told you to walk that way, you were walking that way, you saw water, and so you set up camp. But what I really wanted you to do when you came to that water and say, God, we came to water, you asked us to walk, we want to walk, how are we going to keep on walking? And if we were to do that, we could have parted the Red Sea, we could have crossed the Red Sea, we could have closed it, and Egypt couldn't even, they maybe never even got to us in the first place because we weren't camping there. But because we didn't do that, maybe then God might have had to even change some things, because God does change some things. He does. He's an amazing God. So I can make terrible decisions for the next 15 years. That's not God's plan. But then it's 15 years from now, I could say, God, I'm so sorry. I want to serve you right now. And he says, new plans, got to figure it out. Old school GPSs, right? When you set them up, those big ones, I guess your phone kind of does it, but not the same way as the dramatic ones that you used to set in your car. And it would say, like, turn right, and you're far in the left lane, you can't do it. And then it says, rerouting. Yeah, that's a good one. I think God's so much better than that. But he's willing. He's able to make things work because he gave us the power of choice. I got to tell you one quick story. I know somebody that took one of those GPS things and then drove onto a ferry. You should try that. Get one of the old GPS things and then drive onto a ferry and have the ferry go out into the water with that. It doesn't like it. It doesn't like it. It can't quite figure out what on earth could be possibly happening. It thinks you just drove into the Puget Sound. So yeah, I highly recommend trying those things out. God refuses to give up. God refuses to give up. He's always going to come up with more plans. And his plans will get bigger as we get more connected to him. And his plans will get more finite as we need them to get more finite. In Sabbath school, I think it concluded, the one that was in here, it concluded with, basically we need to get back to our fundamentals of, it's all about the cross. It's all about Jesus. It's all about heaven. And there are a trillion ways to derail that. So there's so many ways where we can get, but Adventism stands for this, or this. There's so many ways. We got to get back to the fundamentals. This world is not our home. This world is not our home. Heaven's our home. It's our entire purpose to make sure we get as many people there as possible. But while we do that, let's continue to be a light to people around us. Let's continue to lead by example. Let's continue to be Spirit-filled. Let's continue to do whatever it is that God asks us to do. If he says walk, let's find a way to walk until he tells us to do something else, not till we see something that gets scary and we can't do it anymore. Let's have the faith to say, I'm going to keep doing what you asked me to do until you tell me stop. I'm going to call people for advice. I'm going to get people's prayer. I'm going to get a circle of prayer around. I'm going to get people that are prayer warriors to make sure that we're continuing to do the right thing. But I'm going to do it until Jesus tells me not to. And as soon as he does, even if it doesn't make sense, I'm going to make sure that happens. I was about 22 probably, 22 when I fully said, God, 100% you. Now, I'd love to say that I've lived that way ever. It's not. We're still humans. We make all sorts of weird things. But I've known God forever. I've been trained in Adventism and in Christianity forever. I knew those things, but it wasn't until I was like 22 where I fully said, God, all that stuff that I'm stressed about, all that stuff that I put in front of you, I don't care. I truly don't care about it anymore. It's all you. It's all you. And I can say from that point forward, not that everything's been great. That's not the point at all. From that point forward, it's been the greatest adventure of anything I could ever imagine. The more impossible things than I could ever possibly fathom, and then God coming through, right? I mean, we can think at the beginning of this school year, by second week of school, they're like, oh, by the way, we don't have water. Like, our well is dry. And I'm thinking, it's a school. You have to have water. What do you mean you don't have water? Oh, yeah, we don't have water, but we're going to dig a well. I was like, cool. Let's see the budget. Oh, no, we don't have money for it, but we got to do it because we got to have water. It's like, well, I'm with you to some extent, but what is happening? And then fast forward, 6 months, and we have dug, I think, 3 new wells, and we were donated. We had a donation. I was sitting in chapel, and I get a text of like, hey, come down to the office. And I was like, it's chapel. I don't leave chapel. Like, I tell the kids to sit quietly and pay. I'm going to lead by example. I don't leave. And they're like, no, you will want to come down here. And so I was like, fine. So I come down there, and there's a couple people sitting in my office, and they're like, hey, we heard about your well stuff. I want to make sure that that's not the stressor that's on you. You need to be focused on these kids. Here you go. They hand me an envelope, and then they left. I was like, okay. Open up $75,000. What the world? I don't even fathom what that number of money could possibly be. That's God. It's just straight God. Now that's not like, yay, now there's plenty more things going on and all those things, but it's one of those reminders that God says, I'm always with you. Just keep walking. Whatever path I asked you to do that path. I got your back. I'm going before you. I'm going behind you. I'm going with you. All those things. And that's the same plan that he has for every single one of us. It will never be boring to be on God's adventure. It'll be the opposite. It'll be sometimes a little bit too much. And you say, whoa, and God's like, I just asked you to keep walking. I'll take care of everything else. God goes behind him in a cloud that makes a fire. He does all sorts of stuff. And then it becomes world famous. It becomes world famous. The whole world now knows the God of the Israelites. Same God we serve. Don't get bogged down, and I've already heard that story. I know that it happens. We serve the exact same God that caused that story to happen. Whatever's going on in our lives, we want to give that to him. We want to give that to him. I'm just so thankful to be able to be a part of God's plans, to be able to work with youth, to be able to meet new people at churches, and to be a part of a worldwide organization to lead people to Jesus. Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. We want to go the extra mile, even if it means through water. We want to go the extra mile, and God's going to empower us to be able to do that. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear God, we again just want to say thank you to you as we recognize you as the God of everything. All of our worries and all of our stresses, they have a tendency to melt away. So we want to get better at that. We want to get better at just recognizing you and seeing you as the answer to our problems. God, while we're doing that, some of that's got a lot of I in it. We want to be better at that, but we want to be used by you to serve others. We want to be used by you to teach others about you, because ultimately we want to spend eternity in heaven, and we want heaven to be filled. So God, whatever that looks like, whether that's through series of meetings, we just want to be used by you for that. My passion is Adventist education, and so we ask for you to just pour out blessings on that, on each one of those students. We want to pray on their behalf. If they're not praying, we want to intercede on their behalf so that they can feel you there with them all the time, God. Thank you for this church. Thank you for the mission that you've put on their hearts, on each of these members. And it's a great thing when diverse people come together for one common goal, is you. So God, as we continue our Sabbath, we just ask for amazing rest. We ask for peace that passeth understanding. What a beautiful thing that could be, and that's a miracle too. So we give the rest of this time to you, and we ask that you power us for an amazing week of being able to connect with people. We thank you for being an amazing God, and we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.